or Release the Ants as a lethal spell.
Yeah.
So in Logan's list, it appears that it's much more about actually as a backup plan for show and tell, much more so than the conventional lists.
Yeah, it's a legitimate way that he wins a substantial portion of games, just actually assembling the 2-card combo of show and tell, putting Emrakul into play.
You can see the standings here on our players to the left of their names. Logan Mize in 11th place, Steven Mann in 10th place. That would explain why they made the trek up from Florida. Both players trying to cement their spots in the Players' Championship, and I imagine we'll be traveling to quite a few more opens as well.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think we have seen the last of these two this season. And both players actually, if the season were to end right now, I believe, I'm not positive, but I believe actually they would both have a seat in the Players' Championship.
At 11th place and 10th place, I would have to assume so, because there are people in front of them that have already qualified, Chris Van Meter, Brian Bronwyn, and so forth.
Yeah, there are 3 actually. There are, CVM, BBD, and Tom Ross. So I think 11th is actually the cutoff right now, which certainly gives them incentive to try and solidify their bids. We see Steven Mann going to kick things off with the Deathrite Shaman. Now, we have seen, of course, Delver of Secrets, what feels like from time immemorial, starting trouble on turn 1. Last round we saw Monastery Swiftspear as the spooky 1-drop of choice.
Oh, I've heard some rumors. I've heard some rumblings.
Oh, you'll be around in the elimination rounds, as will Bob Wong, so you haven't seen the last of them. But it looks like Logan Mize is going to fire off a Preordain. I was about to say, Deathrite Shaman, kind of the third string 1-drop here. Preordain, kind of the third string 1-drop for these blue combo decks.
But still, these decks are all about consistency and redundancy, so even the third best, the fourth best option, they'll still play.
Yeah, you just want to be digging. And Logan taking his time. I didn't catch a glimpse of what those cards were, but he did put 1 on top, 1 on the bottom, and is going to grab a Ponder. So I believe, multiple copies of Show and Tell in Logan's hand.
So a reprieve for Logan in this matchup compared to other builds of Delver is Steven's list is a little bit less explosive, as opposed to, say, something like a red, blue, green shell.
He is still going to be able to interact here. Thoughtseize is going to take a peek. We see 2 Show and Tell, a Ponder, a Brainstorm, and lands. This is a reasonably Thoughtseize-proof hand, I feel.
Pretty redundant here. You can take a cantrip or one of the redundant Show and Tells. I would imagine one of the cantrips here, unless he has a backup discard spell to go after the second copy of Show and Tell.
Yeah.
And even still, he may be better served in that world going after Ponder and Brainstorm rather than the 2 Show and Tells.
There are several redundancies here. Of course, you mentioned Ponder, Preordained, Brainstorm, all kind of pieces of the same machine. Logan, his game plan is to Show and Tell Omniscience into play. And I'm taking a look at his list. Okay, well, traditionally Omnitel also has access to some number of Dream Halls, but that it appears is how Logan has made room for these additional Emrakuls.
And they're both essentially the same card. They are things to show and tell into play. You can cast the Dream Halls in some percentage of games. But
I think, Dream Halls actually is more like a redundant show and tell than a redundant Omniscience, although it is both.
Sure.
Once you get Omniscience into play, you are then... Sorry, I'm taking a look at the list. Traditionally, the plan is to then cast Enter the Infinite. We don't have any of those either. So
he wins exclusively through Cunning Wish.
Yeah, so you Cunning Wish, and I'm taking a look to see Cunning Wish for Intuition, which can then get Emrakul, which you can then cast.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the plan. And so, 3 Intuitions the main, 1 left over in the board there.
Which is an interesting adaptation. The Omnitel lists for all the cantrips, in my mind, they are a little bit... There is some fat on them. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of redundant pieces, the Dream Halls you alluded to, the End of the Infinites, cards you're not really thrilled to draw.
Yeah.
And Logan's trying to become much more of a conventional show and tell deck that can also win through Omniscience on top of Emrakul.
Mm-hmm. This man going to follow up his Thoughtseize with a Tarmogoyf, currently doing the requisite math to determine. We come up with a 3-4. So a solid clock. Logan's still at 20. That's not going to last long. And Cunning Wish off the top, looking like it could set him up. As we mentioned, he does have an Intuition in his board. I think that is by far the most common thing to wish for. Plenty of other options here. Ravenous Trap, Trick Bind, Echoing Truth, Pyroblast, through the Breach. Looks like those are your options. And so, we mentioned that there are occasionally competing redundancies. Dream Hall is kind of acting like a show and tell. In this case, there are no Dream Halls. So actually, show and tell is the one card for which there is no replacement.
Sure.
So it's interesting that Steven actually chose to Thoughtseize the Brainstorm. Again, these guys know each other very well. Presumably, Steven does know Logan's list.
Well, Steven would have to have a second discard spell to justify going after the show and tells. If he doesn't have a second one to follow up with, then he's sort of just...
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Second discard spell or something like a Force of Will would also do it.
Sure. And that's an interesting point you make. By taking one of the cantrips here instead of one of the show and tells, he's sort of implying that he can't fight over show and tell. If he had another counterspell, like you mentioned, if he had the familiarity with the list you're talking about, then he would try to fight the fight over show and tell because that's the irreplaceable piece. Because he's choosing not to, it implies a hand with no other discard spells and no counter spells.
Mm-hmm. So Logan is going to resolve that Cunning Wish. He's taking a peek now. The long-range way to turn, and there it is, to turn Cunning Wish into any spell in your library is to Cunning Wish for Intuition, and then Intuition for 3 of that card. We know that Logan has the Show and Tell, and in fact has a redundant Show and Tell. So the follow-up then of Cunning Wish for 3 Emrakuls, and then Show and Telling the Emrakul into play is probably plan A for Logan. Steven did draw a Force of Will.
But it appears no corresponding blue card, just a hand of 2 Tarmogoyfs.
Mm-hmm. So going to choose to crack in. Not going to get any use out of the mana that, well, actually, no, wait, yeah, there is a land. Nothing to do with that 3rd land from Deathrat Shaman, so just going to poke for 1 and drop 2nd Tarmogoyf. Logan Mize down to 16.
Feels like a lot of this game is going to hub around whether or not Steven can find a blue card next turn.
Yeah.
I mean, Logan's got the tools to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
He may not have any sort of redundancy or backup.
Yeah, a blue card. Let's see, he has 4 days, 4 Force of Will. I'm trying to decide if days would do anything. Logan has access to another Soul Land, but then he would lose his City of Traders if he cast it, or if he played it. So he actually currently is not protected from days either.
Yeah.
Having said that, the initial statement, Steven needs to draw a blue card, and he's going to do that anyway if he draws a days. But Logan going to take a peek, cast Cataxian Probe, sees what's up.
So Logan knows that the shields are down for right now, but that's subject to change, and a draw step that may have changed something.
that simplified the process, I think. So no longer needing to Intuition for Emrakul. He could just cast Show and Tell and put the Emrakul into play. Steven would also get to put a Tarmogoyf into play, which is not a negligible army. He would then have 6 permanents total, and you then get into some kind of hairy territory where if you attack with Emrakul, can Steven survive that attack and then crack back, something like that. Alternatively, Logan can Intuition for Omniscience, and then Show and Tell Omniscience into play, and then cast the Emrakul and get the extra turn immediately. Before he does that, he is going to fire off a Ponder, and looked at 3, didn't like him, shuffles them up, and going to take a second peek.
And I think that may be the plan you're describing. If you can find Omniscience, it's way safer. This is probably still safe enough, but the play you're describing is basically a game winner, and this is, probably over 99% to win.
Yeah.
But you can never be too safe.
There are things that can go wrong here, but as we drew it up, Show and Tell, Steven Mann brings a Tarmogoyf to class, Logan Mize brings an Emrakul to class. These are some weird kids bringing some weird animals to class, I'll tell you that much.
And now, Steven is in a bit of a trap now because of Annihilator 6. If he swings with all of his Tarmogoyfs, Emrakul gets to eat 1, and even if Steven generates a permanent, that's still 6 left over. If Steven says go here and say puts a land into play, well, the 1 Tarmogoyf left over, or whatever he chooses to keep after the Annihilator trigger, isn't going to get it done.
And of course, Logan knows that the card that Steven was left with was Force of Will, which is not a permanent. So Steven's draw step could only be 1 permanent, although having said that, it's a Brainstorm, which can be land plus creature or something like that. And Steven has to do the math now. We start with Brainstorm. We found a blue card for our Force of Will, but that ship has sailed.
Yeah, if he finds a land and
there
a
it was.
Creature,
Misty Rainforest, Deathrat Shaman, Tarmogoyf.
But he can't use the fetch land. He can put it into play, but he can't sack it because he's on 16 right now.
He could activate his Deathrat Shaman to gain 2 life and then cast the second Deathrat Shaman.
Sure. Although, is there a creature in either graveyard right now?
That's a good question. There's probably not.
Yeah, I would imagine not.
Yeah. All right, yeah, never mind. Well, once he attacks, there will be.
Sure, he can Alpha Strike.
But let's see, if he does that...
He goes down to 5 permanents in play. Land creature puts him up to 7.
Okay. And if attacking with all 3 Tarmogoyfs, he gets through for 3 damage, and maybe 4 once this Brainstorm goes to the graveyard. I don't recall if there's an instant in Logan's graveyard or not. And actually, neither does Steven. Looks like he's going to take a peek.
Yeah, there's the Brainstorm for the initial Thoughtseize is in the graveyard.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right.
There's no creature. That's where usually Tarmogoyfs are 4 or 5. The creature's what's missing right now.
Okay. So he could crack in with 3 Tarmogoyfs. The Emrakul eats 1. Logan falls to 8. And it looks like that's the plan we're on. Logan says, sure.
Quick block.
Yeah.
Pretty safe.
Yeah, I know what I'm up to. Here's the interesting question. Do you protect yourself somehow by not blocking? No, because you...
No, you got to block there.
Yeah, the permanent, it's going to be there whether... Yeah, you either don't let him use the fetch land so he doesn't get the permanent that way, but you keep the Tarmogoyf in play, so it doesn't actually change anything. Okay.
But I do not believe that this is going to leave... I mean, Steven will get to keep a Tarmogoyf after it's all said and done, but I don't think that's going to be enough to get this.
Yeah, he was going to keep his best permanent, which was Tarmogoyf, anyway he did it, but I guess it actually doesn't make much difference either way. Yep, the squid monster comes to play. Steven Mann picks him up. One of my favorite things about an Emrakul is that the process of resolving Annihilator 6 looks a lot like your opponent scooping up his cards anyway.
Which it often is.
Yeah.
It's hard sometimes to check out. You know, was Steven sacrificing all of his creatures to the Emrakul? Was he packing up all of his cards? Not super clear, but 6 of one, half dozen of the other,
yeah.
right?
What I'm really excited will be to see if in the next set there is an instant speed delve card that you could respond to the Annihilator by delving to exile your graveyard. So it's actually the full-blown pick up your graveyard and your permanents.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it all.
Yeah, I'm maybe trying a little too hard here, but I just want to see it. I want to see that confusion just once. Moving to the sideboards, I already actually talked about a lot of the cards in Logan's sideboard. He mostly has one-ofs that he can get with Cunning Wish.
The one sideboard card that he has 2 sideboard cards that are kind of live here. I guess 3 actually, technically. 3 copies of Pyroclasm, which are okay here, but not great. They don't kill Tarmogoyf, but still answer some of Steven's early pressure. 4 copies of Leyline Sanctity, and sort of the same thing. It's fine against some of the discard spells, but you know, Steven's also bringing counter spells to the table, so it's not a full protection. And then 2 copies of Mize, who shelters all, which again is fine against a fraction of Steven's deck, but doesn't work against other things. The question is, how many cards can he really afford to sideboard here? These decks are pretty lean. They're basically all engine. And so the opportunity cost of sideboarding in cards is really high. I think the 2 Misejus are probably low opportunity cost enough that they can come in.
Yeah, you don't replace spells with those, I wouldn't think. I'm actually not positive. Maybe you do.
Right.
But my inclination would be they would just replace islands.
Yeah, well, I don't know if he can... I don't know where the lands come from that he replaces here. It's tough to say because the 2-minute lands, they seem really important.
Yeah, I don't think you can cut it either City Traders or Ancient Tomb.
Being able to fetch islands against a deck with 4 wastelands seems really important.
Okay,
the volcanics, it's hard to know exactly where the room comes from. And the 3 Pyroclasms and the 4 Leyline Sanctities, much the same deal, except their opportunity cost is much higher because they have to replace spells.
Yeah.
So I would be the most surprised, if I had to guess, the thing that would surprise me the most is he brings in both Pyroclasm and Leyline Sanctity. The thing that would surprise me the second most is he does neither. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I would expect is he brings in one but not the other.
Okay, fair enough. Over on Steven's side, Steven actually gets to improve a great deal, I think. He has access to Spell Pierce, 2 Spell Pierce, 2 Vendilion Click, 2 Submerge, 2 Grafdigger's Cage, 2 Golgari Charm, 1 Life from the Loam, 1 Dismember, 1 Null Rod, and 2 True Name Nemesis. So this is, again, we've seen these style decks have these sideboards time and time again where you're not really bringing in crazy high impact 4-ofs that change the way your games play out. You're just fine tuning, tweaking a little bit and kind of fiddling with the numbers. In this case, he gets to replace his dead cards like Abrupt Decay with things like Spell Pierce, Vendilion Click. I think those are the 2 big ones.
Yeah, besides that, there's not really a lot going on the sideboard that I like, but picking up, for the matchup at least,
Yeah, okay.
but picking up 2 clicks and 2 spell pierces, that's a substantial upgrade.
Yeah, I guess that's normally that I feel like that you tucked in with these 1-ofs and 2-ofs, you'll find like something weird like extra removal, like some duresses or something. But yeah, actually, it looks like Steven hasn't actually given himself too much diversity there to the extent where, yeah, I think it's just 2 spell pierce and 2 Vendilion Click. And those abrupt decays, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe those are absolute blank cardboard in this matchup.
And yes, correct. And you know, there's some parts of his sideboard right now that are anti-combo, but simply don't happen to overlap here. You know, the 2 copies of Grafdigger's Cage, the 2 copies of Golgari Charm, the Null Rod, those do work in a percentage of the combo matchups.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen to be this particular one.
Yeah, that's true. You know, taking a look at Steven's main deck, other than those 4 abrupt decays, I think you're actually pretty happy with everything. The 1 Sultai Charm doesn't do much, actually. In this case, Sultai Charm is basically just draw 2, discard 1.
Catalog,
Yeah.
not a great deal.
No. Catalog has been legacy legal for some time.
And a single color also.
Yeah. These guys could have been cataloging the whole time.
Yeah.
But no, they will not be cataloging, I don't think. Well, having said that, if Sman draws Sultai Charm, he will be cataloging. Because I don't think there are targets for the naturalized side or the monocolored creature side.
But it's still better than Abrupt Decay.
True.
It's blue, so
okay, sure, yeah.
the old standby.
The hidden 4th mode on every blue charm. So this man going to lead off Underground Sea into Ponder.
And even though turn 1 Ponder, fine opening for Steven here. Logan would much rather be playing against early cantrips than early pressure. When Logan has the opportunity to just develop his mana, kind of cantrip, free of pressure, it's really hard for Delver decks to win. It's got to be a mixture of pressure and disruption that gets it done.
Yeah, take a look at Steven's hand. There actually isn't much. Well, I did catch, I think there's a Vendilion Click there tucked at the end, so that helps. But it looks like Forcible Brainstorm, or that is a Ponder, I believe, and not a Brainstorm. Forcible, Ponder, Vendilion Click, and now a fresh Thoughtseize and lands. So the Thoughtseize is going to help, the Vendilion Click is going to help, but not the fastest of starts.
It's still slow. That's exactly what I was about to say. Vendilion Click and Thoughtseize are among the better cards in the matchup, but again, need to be supplemented by more pressure than that.
Yeah, and this is actually one of the variants of Show and Tell where you can actually abuse Vendilion Click without ever casting it. If Logan actually enacts his plan A, which would be to Show and Tell and put in Omniscience with the intent to cast Emrakul, you can just put the Vendilion Click into play off of Show and Tell.
Oh, and then your trigger occurs before Logan regains priority.
Yeah.
Fancy.
Yep. So through any amount of interaction on the stack, you can get that Vendilion Click into play. Kind of a corner case. And also blows up in your face if you just puts the Emrakul into play. So there's that.
Right, sure.
Well, Logan gonna cast Ponder of his own. Some thinking mages we have coming up from Florida.
Ponderous. A very well-named card.
Often the user is compelled to
We're going to look at these 3 cards, going to look at this flooded strand in my hand and really noodle this one through.
What do they mean? Steven Mann gonna Ponder again. Finds a second Force of Will. I didn't catch that 3rd card there, but...
I think it was a Deathrite Shaman, a land, and a Force of Will.
Okay, Deathrite Shaman, pretty big game here. As you mentioned, getting pressure into play, actually the most important step for any Delver deck. Deathrite Shaman is not the most aggressive, but it can certainly do its job of 2 damage a turn, and kind of opens up the window to continue cantripping, continue leaving up disruption while casting your threats.
Though the ship may have sailed here, and I think Steven agrees here. At this point of the game, the Deathrite Shaman's not really ramping him in anything. He'd rather spend this turn casting a Thoughtseize, I believe, than a Deathrite Shaman. And then at that point, he has a 3rd land already for the Liliana of the Veil and the Vendilion Click in his hand. So the Deathrite Shaman's not ramping anything. It's not, the opportunity cost for casting this turn is too high.
Okay, sure.
And even though it's a nice card, it looks like Steven says, I want to do better than that.
Sure.
Mana's accounted for, and
basically just functioning as like Grim Lavamancer that only goes to players, I guess, at that stage. And as you mentioned, would rather cast Thoughtseize, very much reasonably so, I think. And Logan has access to a Force of Will. He can put the stop to this if he wants, but at what cost? We see Brainstorm, Force of Will, Show and Tell tucked there in the back, and Lotus Petal and lands I saw. I'm not sure what else we have to work with.
Using a Force of Will on something like a Thoughtseize when you know your opponent has Daze it's tough to pull the trigger on it.
Logan just going to lay him out. Thoughtseize resolves. We see, as mentioned, Force of Will, Show and Tell, Lotus Petal, Brainstorm, Preordain, and beside you, Who Shelters All, and Ancient Tomb.
And I like Logan's play here of not Force of Willing because of the Boseiju in hand. He doesn't really have to worry about counterspells going forward. And so once the Boseiju's in play, then he can be much more aggressive Force of Willing things right now. But if he plays into this Thoughtseize and Steven is able to Force of Will back, he might be giving Steven a window to use a Force of Will when otherwise it would be very challenging to do so.
Sure. Now, besides Who Shelters All is very effective at forcing through Show and Tells. What it doesn't actually help you do is keep your opponent from like using dazes for value on, for example, like a Brainstorm with a fetch land untapped or something like that.
Correct. Though Logan has a lot of mana to play with also. He has an Ancient Tomb and a Lotus Petal, so his hand is pretty counterspell resistant at this point, so no reason to take any risks.
So with Thoughtseize finished, Steven Mann is done for the turn. Logan takes the draw step, finds Omniscience. That would have been pretty good with that Show and Tell. But Logan Mize now out of Show and Tell, so I'm guessing we're going to see him go dig. Fires off Preordain.
I like leading with Preordain instead of Brainstorm here. No shuffle effects right now, so. And also a pretty stocked hand, so the putting some cards back and reshuffling, not exactly what Logan is in the market for. He's looking for just some more broad-based improvement to his hand.
Yeah. Notably, he did not play a land before he cast that Preordain, which is a little awkward against a Daze deck.
Well, I think Logan wants to play Boseiju this turn regardless, so it's
sure.
He's kind of priced in.
Yeah, Steven Mann he knows about that, about the Boseiju, so not much hidden information, just the one card. Steven Mann gonna cast Force, pitching Force. Smells blood, I suppose. Keeps that Preordain from resolving and wants to keep Logan Mize from going digging, finding his way out of this.
Well, not only does he smell blood, but he knows because of the Boseiju that he's not going to be able to save that Force of Will for a Show and Tell down the line. So you had to fight over something. It might as well be this.
That's fair. Well, having said that, you actually, like, even if Force of Will becomes blank cardboard against Boseiju, blank cardboard is actually not useless here. You have a Liliana in hand, which you presumably are going to start upticking. You have Brainstorms, which you may want to shuffle away your dead cards. So even though the cards are not going to be useful, just having them has value as well.
Yeah.
But as it stands, Preordain to the graveyard. Logan Mize, as you said, plays beside you, Who Shelters All. Goes ahead and gets that Lotus Petal in play as well and ships it back. And Steven Mann has the option to cast Liliana. Would rather use his Vendilion Click, plays it on the draw step, and likely going to catch an Emrakul here.
Well, I think Logan is likely to Brainstorm in response to this Vendilion Click.
Logan's hand, Brainstorm, Force of Will, Emrakul, and Omniscience, I believe.
I guess he could also hypothetically let it resolve because his hand's a little messy. I like Brainstorming, though.
Yeah. A lot of options there. He could Force of Will the Vendilion Click, too, if you want to keep both cards. But I don't know that you do. You still have to find the Show and Tell. That's, again, the one non-redundant piece. But he's going to Brainstorm. And found Ponder, Force of Will, and I believe a land. So can safely tuck both of his combo pieces on top of his library if he chooses. He doesn't actually need the Omniscience at all if he finds Show and Tell. Putting Emrakul into play should be good enough.
Well, it's risky against a deck with Liliana the Veil.
Sure, okay. And we know Steven actually does have that.
In an ideal world, Logan would like to go off through the Omniscience. That's the safest thing. But I think that he may have to go for Emrakul, depending on the speed of the game that's getting played out. Right now he's not under any pressure, especially if he fights over this Vendilion Click, then he's clean to wait kind of as long as he wants.
True. Yeah, and actually, there's an additional incentive to Force of Willing the Vendilion Click, just so you're not taking 3 damage a turn.
Yeah. No, the pressure, that's the element of the Delver deck that really needs to be combined with the Disruption to fight these combo decks. So if Logan can cut him off with the pressure, he has to worry much less about the Disruption.
So Brainstorm finished resolving, and he is actually going to, looks like, fight over this Vendilion Click. Force pitching Omniscience, it appears. So that leaves him with a Force, a Ponder, and a land. No, sorry, and an Emrakul. Yeah. And I was actually, I said I thought I saw a land earlier, but I'm pretty sure it was actually a second copy of Emrakul, now that I get a good look at that first one. But Stephen Mann prepared to fight, and just gets a Lotus Petal out of the deal. So uses Daze, basically cashing in Daze for a Lotus Petal. Takes his draw, finds Brainstorm. Can replay the land and cast Liliana if he'd like. I believe he would lose the Brainstorm if he upticked it then at that point.
I don't know if Liliana and just starting to plus is necessarily a winning recipe, but with Logan being resource light, if he's willing to force a will over, then that's a huge victory for Steven.
Yeah. You were always going to be up one card with Liliana. Now you're up two. So finds Ancient Tomb. Not a surprise, actually. He knew it was there, I think.
Yeah.
And now just sitting with an Emrakul. Liliana out of the way now. So show and tell, putting Emrakul into play, that would be a game winner now at this point, barring another Liliana off the top.
And there's only 2 copies in Steven's list and 0 in the sideboard.
So halfway there.
Has to find the show and tell, of course, which is
okay.
Therein lies the rub, but
right.
He is relatively safe to resolve.
Steven going to fire off a Brainstorm. Finds more cantripping. Going to put back a land and a Daze. The Daze is actually, yeah, as I mentioned, you could Daze, you could not Daze a show and tell from here if it were to be cast, thanks to Beside You. But Daze would actually be pretty good against like things like Brainstorm and Ponder.
Assuming that Logan doesn't play the Ancient Tomb first. Yeah, if he's just stuck on this board, then it can be really good.
But gonna tuck him away and then fire off a Ponder again. And gives it a shuffle.
I like how aggressive Steven is with his Ponder shuffles. A lot of people just keep those. He had land, Daze, and Tarmogoyf. The Tarmogoyf he can't cast this turn. Even though the Tarmogoyf is a bit of a prize, there's other threats in Steven's deck, and a draw step of a land and a Daze here is probably, that cost is not worth the Tarmogoyf.
So actually, I believe he just drew the Tarmogoyf anyway.
Perfect.
But sure, yeah. That's exactly what we wanted. We wanted the threat, but we did not want the dead cards to go behind it. So, yeah, it works out just fine.
And now a second Tarmogoyf.
Hey.
Beautiful.
Mismatched Tarmogoyfs, for shame.
It is hard on the eyes. That's true.
Modern Master Tarmogoyf going to come down. We are going to do a little calculating. It is a 5/6, thanks to that Liliana in the graveyard. No, it is a 6/7, thanks to that Liliana and that Lotus Petal in the graveyard.
Right. The usual 4 of land, instant sorcery, creature. Ooh, another Emrakul. Nice.
So redundant copies of the redundant combo pieces. We're still show and tell away.
And that Daze, that Wasteland that Steven drew is basically perfect. It's now paired with a Spell Pierce. Not even show and tell works.
So Tarmogoyf going to swing in for 6, drop Logan to 11. We are suddenly on a 1-turn clock. This game changed fast. If Logan had drawn show and tell immediately, he could cast it off Ancient Tomb, put Emrakul into play, and that would have done it. But instead, shows his full house.
Yep.
A
losing hand.
Yeah, Emrakul's full of Ancient Tombs, but it's not going to hold up to a pair of Tarmogoyfs. And Logan excels. Logan was not the winner 2 weeks ago in Atlanta when these two played their win and in at the Legacy Open.
Was it the same matchup? I mean, obviously, Steven's list is incorporating some new cards, but was it essentially the same matchup?
Yeah, it was, Bug versus Omnitel. And it was a pretty close 3-game set. Actually, you know what? I take it back. It was in the Standard Open. I'm confusing it with another match.
Okay.
But, they played their winner in Standard, Mono Blue Devotion versus Green Red Monsters.
Okay.
Decks that we are done with, in theory, or one of them.
Green Red Monsters was in the elimination rounds of our Standard Open this morning, rather.
Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, Logan Mize, seeing that he cannot play mono blue cards in Standard, has decided rather than taking his ball and go home, he's going to take his ball and go to the Legacy Open.
Legacy will always be the warm, inviting shelter for those of you who want to be casting blue spells.
And Logan Mize is likely one of those players. I love Kevin Jones's explanation for this morning when I talked to him about why he chose to play Jeskai Tempo in Standard. He said, I just wanted to play the blue cards. I knew I wanted to play blue. I just tried all the blue cards. These were the best blue cards.
Well, and his build actually did have some real blue cards in it. I mean, Jeskai Charm is blue-ish. Mantis Rider, not really. Definitely more of a red and a white card than a blue card.
All right, an imposter blue card.
But Dig Through Time and Steam Augury, definitely blue cards.
We drew some cards.
He did.
We didn't even just draw them off the top. We looked at a bunch of cards and picked the ones we wanted.
So, to some extent.
It is,
with Steam Augury,
that is fair.
To some extent.
Yeah. But we manipulated our library, which is always the goal, I think.
I think every Steam Augury I saw from Kevin in the tournament, he ended up splitting best spell, third best spell versus second best spell, 2 lands, and got second best spell, 2 lands about 100% of the time.
Sometimes he needs the lands, though, right? I mean, that
he was able to cast Narset with Negate back up.
Yeah, and he needed the land to do that.
Yeah, so it's not so bad.
Yeah. I'm less diplomatic than Kevin was, but I played like a fiddle was the term I used. So I don't know. I felt like he wanted. I felt like second best spell and then land actually the best card was in the way that split worked out. But maybe I'm being a little generous.
Every Steam Augury is the same. Every Factor Fiction is different. Every Steam Augury is the same.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like just change one little detail there, and suddenly the cards play out completely differently.
I would call it a big detail, but yeah.
All right, sure. A couple of words, but a big detail.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Factor Fiction, that's a card that I've always felt. When I first started exploring Legacy and like kind of learning what all the decks were for the first time, it surprised me that Factor Fiction was not a more prominent piece of that puzzle.
I think the game, there's 2 issues with it. One, the games are over so fast, so 4 mana is a big cost. Okay. And B, a lot of the cards that you're going to draw don't necessarily overlap with what your opponent's up to. So, you're playing in a matchup where you have removal spells in your deck. Your opponent is playing a deck with no creatures to remove.
Okay, sure.
And so your FOFs don't have maximum value because you're flipping over dead cards. When Factor Fiction was legal in Standard, it was, all sweepers, removal spells, counter spells, playing in a format that was, a lot of creatures in it. So every card you turn over with Factor Fiction is either a land or a relevant spell. In Legacy, that's a lot less likely to be the case because the decks are so disparate that you're going to be flipping over dead cards a bunch of the time.
Okay, yeah, that actually makes a ton of sense. Especially given that all blue decks are brainstorm decks.
Yeah.
With, very nearly. And kind of the core tenet of the brainstorm plus fetch philosophy is that you can play situationally dead cards and get away with it.
But once Factor Fiction's in you start getting really punished for having those kind of cards flipped over.
And of course, Jace the Mind Sculptor basically it competes on the same point of the curve.
They are competing at the same point of the curve.
Yeah, that's the real problem. Logan Mize, Leyline of Sanctity. So as you, I don't want to say as you predicted, because there was a good deal of hedging in your prediction, but as you alluded, Leyline of Sanctity going to come down and provide some protection from Thoughtseizes, Liliana Edicts, and the like.
And pretty much a perfect turn 1 preordained here, seeing a cantrip and a leyline as the top 2 cards, and you get to take the cantrip and put that leyline on the bottom.
Redundant leylines, not so helpful. Steve Mann, no 1-drop. No 1-drop threat, no 1-drop cantrip.
Treasure Cruise.
Not a situation I'd be happy with, just in general, but yeah, we do see Treasure Cruise looming. We saw some Treasure Cruises last round. We saw some 1 casting cost Treasure Cruises.
Now you see Steven did have Ponder in his hand on turn 1, but wanted to keep Spell Pierce up.
Okay.
And if that's the case, I imagine he's going to be casting it on the first reasonable target that Logan presents, and I would say that this qualifies.
Yeah, of course. Trading in your Spell Pierce for a cantrip is very frequently worth it. I don't want to say always, but it's a real cost to just sit there with a mana open the entire game.
Yeah.
So getting your mana base freed up to actually start casting your spells, I think is worthwhile here. Also, once you have Treasure Cruise in your hand, I'm in a hurry to cast things.
Just do whatever.
Yeah.
Just cast whatever.
Dump them. Get them in the graveyard. Unfortunately for Sman, his plan backfired. He wanted to free up his mana so he wouldn't have to leave it up for Spell Pierce, but he drew another one. So now he has to leave it up again.
Yeah.
He doesn't necessarily. He could actually cast Ponder, which looks like is what he's going to do.
Yeah, his only other land's a Wasteland 2, so I think he wants to ponder for another land, hold a Spell Pierce, and then next turn he has the ability to cast Tarmogoyf with Spell Pierce back up.
Yeah. And the Ponder saw 2 lands, one of which was a fetch land and a Deathrite Shaman. So very good Ponder there. But no, okay. Gonna shuffle him away.
I love it,
Yeah.
because I shuffle so much with my Ponders that
Yeah. I think I'm happy with a land drop here. But
why settle for mediocrity?
yeah, all right, I hear you. What's he looking for then, if not a land drop?
I don't know. A better 3 cards. Whatever. Who cares?
Okay.
Just why settle? Why settle for the worst of it?
Okay, sure. I was happy with all of them. Oh, I guess he
Okay.
already had the other land. Okay,
That makes sense.
That changes things, yeah. And looks like just shipped it back. So is going to continue to sit on that second Spell Pierce. Logan Mize makes his 3rd land drop, and still nothing. Nothing coming. It looks like his hand is just Flooded Strands and Force of Wills. Or are those Brainstorms? Those are...
It's Pierce, a Brainstorm.
No, in Logan's hand.
Oh, in Logan's hand. I think it's Intuition, and I think Intuition and Brainstorm 2 lands. The Intuition and Brainstorm artwork look pretty similar from the upper left-hand corner.
When you only see the left 10%. Probably a lot of cards look the same when you get there.
Yeah. It's 2 copies of Intuition.
Okay. Stephen Mann is going to develop his board, makes that 3rd land drop in the form of Wasteland. No target for it, wouldn't want to do so anyway. So he adds Tarmogoyf to his board and still has mana up for Spell Pierce. Although, with Logan Mize continuing to make his land drops, we're getting to the point where Spell Pierce is not going to matter for too much longer.
And his discard draws are no good here, so he's really trying to find more counterspells at this stage.
So Stephen gonna go ahead and crack his fetch. Does Steven have access to Stifle? I don't believe he does.
I think he's responding now because Steven is effectively tapped out with this Misty Rainforest on the stack. This is an opportunity for Logan to go ahead and resolve an Intuition or some other spell that Steven could otherwise Spell Pierce. So great operations from Logan.
Okay. So gonna fire off the Intuition. Steven, only 1 island, so can't use Daze. Would basically have to have Force of Will plus blue card to put a stop here. And Logan going to fetch 3 Emrakuls. We know he has the 2nd copy of Intuition already in his hand, which could find Omniscience, or sorry, could find Show and Tell.
Yeah.
Interesting that he chooses to get Emrakul first. When you Intuition for Emrakuls, you actually put 2 copies in your graveyard, and they don't stay there long. So we saw him pick up his graveyard, shuffle it into his library due to those Emrakul triggers. If you first Intuition for Show and Tell, then you remove redundant Show and Tells from your library. But if you first get Emrakul,
they're all back in.
Yeah, you actually give yourself a couple more dead draws. You regain what was in your graveyard. And I don't recall if there was anything of any significance there. I think there was a preordain.
Yeah, nothing huge. Ponder. And Steven has found the Sultai Charm.
Nice. Oh, and and making me eat my words. Here I was saying, no targets for Naturalize.
Well, he can neither cast the the Sultai Charm right now, nor has a discard spell to even warrant getting the ley line off the board. So we're still kind of far away from it mattering.
Yeah,
but
fair enough.
It's at least in play that it could matter, which is a starting point.
Yeah, I think, it's an important part of the puzzle going along. Like, I feel like you're going to want to get that Ley Line of Sanctity out of play eventually. You're also going to want to get your opponent dead, so maybe just adding more threats to the board is what the doctor ordered here.
But I will say this, for the order in which Logan is sequencing his stuff here, by getting the Emrakul first, he shuffled his graveyard. Steven has a Treasure Cruise in hand, and now it's become very awkward for him to cast this Treasure Cruise, nuking his own graveyard to enormous cost because now these Tarmogoyfs have no juice.
Yeah, Tarmogoyf number 2 going to come down. The first one, still a 3/4, going to crack in. Logan Mize down to 16. And as you mentioned, enormous cost for Treasure Cruise here. Kind of a good reminder for those watching. We've been very excited about Treasure Cruise after we saw it do great work last round. Treasure Cruise is not free.
No, and usually in Tarmogoyf battles, in Legacy, your opponent's cooperating to some extent. I think the non-synergy with Tarmogoyf is really overstated because your opponent's going to be casting stuff and creatures are going to die, whatever. But there are going to be random spots like this where now it matters quite a bit.
So, firing off a Brainstorm. Saw him put a Leyline of Sanctity back. No way to cast that, I assume. Yeah, of course not. Actually just lands the tap for colors or blue. So if you do not have Leyline of Sanctity in your opening hand, you simply cannot cast it in this deck.
It's just a stinker for forever.
Yep. Blank cardboard.
You could show Talon into play, I suppose.
Okay. Fair enough. And so Logan tucked away and is gonna crack that fetch. And only 3 islands in his library.
Yeah, he's run out of basics, so this Wasteland's now on.
Which is a tough spot to be in.
Though, Steven in his own way is a little pinned for mana right now.
That is true. Yeah, if he uses the Wasteland, he would have just the 2 mana left. I don't believe any in his hand, so. And there's that pesky Leyline again.
And a Force of Will and 2 Leylines, so unless this is a card that's guaranteeing a kill, this is a...
Yeah, get those out of there. Oh,
whoa. Oh, no, he has a fetch land. This is fine.
Okay. It's like 2 completely opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Steven will shuffle away anything.
Yep, and Logan will keep them all.
Yeah.
They're in my deck for a reason, man.
Sure.
It's all fine.
Yeah. All right, so the 5th land, the Flooded Strand that can get rid of those Leyline of Sanctity. He's going to go ahead and crack it right now. Again, only 3 actual basic islands still in the deck. He's going to have to get a Volcanic Island with this one.
And now he's out of lands to fetch 4. He only has 2 Volcanics and 3 islands, so...
Oh, wow.
His fetch lands now, of which there are 5 remaining in his deck, are dead draws.
That's a tough spot.
Yep.
Okay.
It doesn't come up that often because these decks kill so quick that it's whatever, but this game's going on a little bit longer, and now this has come up.
And as we mentioned, these guys know each other. They travel together. I've traveled to tournaments with people before and not known their mana base exactly.
Oh, no,
certainly. But
I would never ask, whatever.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, sure. But there's a real possibility that through conversation, Steven Mann has actually been made aware that there are exactly 3 islands and 2 volcanic islands as mana-producing lands.
And it looks like Logan's just saying, I'm pulling the trigger.
Okay. We know Steven Mann has access to a Spell Pierce. Logan Mize has Force of Will for that. Steven also has a Daze.
Yeah.
So we've seen that dance play out. Spell Pierce the Show and Tell, Force of Will, Pitch, Intuition, and Response, and the backbreaking Daze is going to put a stop to things, I think.
Yeah. This is all sorts of bad now for Logan.
So Logan just passes the turn.
I don't mind jamming there because who knows if it's getting better, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Like you needed to find, as you mentioned, one of your soul lands to actually generate mana. You have to assume you're going to lose a land to Wasteland, so you're not actually getting to play around Spell Pierce by untapping there anyway. Yeah, I agree. I think you've got to make Steven have it. I don't think he had the Daze until just a turn ago.
Last turn, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't think that I'm very pleased with the way that Logan has played this game generally. But sometimes your opponent has the Daze and the Spell Pierce. And then gets on a boat and sails away.
Cruising away.
Yeah. So there goes the graveyard. Here comes 3 cards. Delver of Secrets, Underground Sea. Hasn't met his land drop, so plays Tropical. Gets Deathrite Shaman in play instead. That still says 3/4. I don't know if it actually is, thanks to the Treasure Cruise, but yeah, well, it's at least a 3/4. We can see 3 types there.
Yeah. Yeah, no creature in the graveyard, but sorcery instant land.
So going to crack in. Logan down to 6. 1 turn clock. Needs to find Show and Tell to put his Emrakul into play, and that's not good enough.
Yep. Steven could just attack through it.
So for the second time in as many opens, Logan Mize and Steven Mann travel to a tournament together, make it all the way to the win and in round, and Steven Mann sends him home.
And in a way that I